Alright. Hey guys, welcome to the PiG Daily, episode number 84. The moment has finally come, the moment of reckoning, the moment where we look at the most epic, amazing, beautiful, sexy game of 2016. It is, of course, game number 5 on Sejong Station between Dark and Byun in the Blizzcon Grand Finals. And it is just the game which brings out the amazement in everybody. You know what? I was thinking this is the most amazing series ever, and it's partly because I watched this series live, and I was in this huge audience, and everyone was so much emotion, everyone was going crazy the whole time, and I was cheering and losing my mind. But in hindsight, some of the games were kind of one-sided like that last one. It was like, oh man, you just got wrecked. Galactic Process, Byun wrecked Dark, Dark wrecked Byun on Gettysburg. Like, some of the games were a little bit one-sided, even though they were immense shows of skill. And even though the losing player played very well, the other guy was just like, no, I'm too good and this map's good for me. And they just like shove them out of the game. But this map on Sejong Station, this is the map which made the whole finals so beautiful and such a memorable moment. Let's take a look, guys. Let's go. All right. So, excuse me. This is game number 5, Byun on match point. He is up 3 games to 1. It is a best of 7, so first to 4 wins does win the game. And finally, at this important moment, Byun decided to pull out his classic 2-1-1 build, the very fast double marine medevac drop. So he will be going barracks, gas, into a command center. Meanwhile, Dark, the safest player of all time, is of course going to be going for that gas pool into Overlord speed. Once again, he's going to build 2 Zerglings, and he's just going to chill at home with them. He's so patient, he's so defensive, doesn't get carried away at all, and yeah, he just wants to kind of make sure he blocks anything that comes his way. Byun here, once again, not SCV scouting and going straight across the map. Yet another game where 2 Zerglings arriving at the natural could have killed that SCV. And I really feel like this is a big missed opportunity for Dark. I think if his Zerglings go down this path, they will easily get there before the Reaper gets home. Of course, the Reaper saw the delayed hatchery and was like, shit, there could be Zerglings coming, turned around, got halfway home, and Byun says, well, if Zerglings haven't arrived yet, then I know they're not even ever coming. And then he turns around to be aggressive again. So Byun himself knew, oh shit, I'm in trouble. Oh, he didn't send Zerglings across. Cool. Dark, showing what I kind of said was his big issue throughout. And it's his strength, but it's also his weakness because he does it too much. Like, he plays too much to his defensive strength. He's like, hey, I'll just play safe against everything because I'm so good at defending. And I think it was his downfall this series. I think Byun here, just always skipping the SCV scout, and not leaving the Reaper at home, was exposed to this. If you're going to play a pool first, you're going to build 2 Zerglings so early. I think there is no reason to not send those across the map. I think Dark here, I would love to speak Korean and to have his contact and to hear his thoughts on it. But for now, I'm going to be super critical because having a logical opinion makes sense. And really, there's no reasoning behind not doing that I can see. So definitely Dark, I think it does give up an edge there. Notice this, first creep tumor at the front because it's very important to get creep to your 3rd base, but second creep tumor immediately spreading down that back door. And that's because he wants to take this as his 4th base. That's very important. Overlord speed does come in. Dark spots the 2-1-1. He knows, okay, from about 4 minutes 30, I need to start pumping out Zerglings because at 5 minutes 20, 2 medevacs and 16 Marines with stim will be walking across that map, and well, they'll be hitting at 5 minutes 20. They'll have already flown across the map. So Dark here, he's got the Overlord speed, he's adding a second gas. By the way, guys, I didn't really specify it, but if you guys are wondering, normally with Dark's build, he puts back on gas at about 3 minutes 45. Yeah, he leaves one guy mining on gas, pulls 2 off after Overlord speed, and then he puts 2 on right about 3 minutes 45, 3 minutes 50. Because he does mine so much gas so early. But then he does also grab a very fast second gas, around 4 minutes. Sometimes 3 minutes 50. And then a super early double evo chamber, 4 minutes 10. I wouldn't recommend you to follow these timings unless you are a perfect god like Dark. But just in case you're curious, or you are a GM player who feels they can macro at close to Dark's level, you might want to try out those sort of timings. So here comes the double drop as expected, flying across this map. Let's assess the situation a little bit. 2-1-1, single engineering bay, getting +1. So no double engineering bay follow-up, no third CC follow-up, straight into tank production. And he's going to queue up combat shields very soon after this stim finishes as well. So he's actually planning a tank evac attack follow-up. The question is, did Dark see that? Yes, he did. He came back in with the Overlord just recently. Actually spotted this. I think it was right about 4 minutes 40, if I remember correctly. Yep. So check this out. Dark, so good at... This is like the timing where you want to scout to kind of see what the follow-up is, because your opponent's already started building the medevacs, and indeed, those medevacs have already picked up and... Whoa! I just clicked on the top bar. Sorry, guys. Those medevacs have already flown across the map. So Dark would have echoes of their last series in Kesper Cup, where Byun actually was building Hellions behind this and put down an armory and then joined up 4 Hellbats really early with the Marines, which basically just wrecks all these Zerglings that are meant to support the Queens. So the Marines just stim forward and focus down the Queens, and the Zerglings can't engage or they get roasted by the Hellbats. So that's a really tough build, where if that was the case, Dark would need to use this Baneling Nest to immediately start morphing Banelings as soon as that finishes. But instead, he sees the tank follow-up, he knows it's going to be a strong tank push, and he knows he needs to not drone too hard so that he has enough Zerglings and Banelings in order to overwhelm the push. Now notice here this dance. Byun here, famous for this build. He very rarely just YOLOs with this build. He always pokes forward, clears creep with a single scan, and then simply tries to force the Zerg to be uncomfortable. Notice Dark here not putting down lots of tumors. He knows that Byun could just stim his way in and snipe that down again. Dark just refusing to go off creep. And that's how you fight this with this defense. Notice Dark here has 7 queens. He's going up to 8 queens because he's pulled the queen off his third to help defend. So he's still got 3 injecting queens and 5 defense queens. But he only has Zerglings. He's adding a couple Banelings now to be super safe. But if he goes off creep, those Marines will gun them down so fast. They'll just stutter step away. So Dark here constantly moving back and forth. Byun using the high ground there actually grabs a queen. Takes a bit of damage on the medevac. And then Dark says, oh, okay, let's respread creep now. I've pushed you back. And through the midst of that, respreading creep on all sides fantastically. And let's think about this, right? Byun has had everything spotted. He can't really deny everything that's happening. He's going to actually catch that Overlord, which is nice. But it does get a good idea of the fact that the move out's happening. A Zergling is also going to come in here. And he sees, okay, yeah, there's tanks. The Marines are moving out. I know the push is coming. So everything Byun is doing has been spotted. There is no secrecy at all. So this is one of these situations in StarCraft where it really comes all down to how the defender deals with the situation. He knows what's happening, but has he got the right response? In this particular scenario, we see a macro hatches down for Dark. He's been on just 2 gases this whole time, which is great because he's fully saturated 3 mineral lines, and now he's adding 2 more gas geysers. So 51 drones to 44 SCVs, so a nice little worker lead, which kind of makes up for the fact that mules are dropping. I'm sure the income tab is pretty similar. Maybe there's not many mules down right now. I guess there are going to be scans dropped to clear creep. But otherwise, pretty similar. And here we do see a little bit of cockiness or over-assuredness from Dark. 3 drones building to saturate this gas. So he's kind of going, yeah, I got enough units to take this. I will be fine, man. I know exactly what's coming. And you know what? If he was playing anyone but Byun, I think this would have been fine. I'm like, yeah, this is a perfect response. There's no way Byun does massive damage with this push. I remember watching live and thinking, Dark knows everything that's happening. He's got the perfect response. He's squeezing in just the right number of drones. And then this engagement happens. So he dances forward. He does take 1 bad tank shot there, loses a few Zerglings, and the unit's lost. He's lost 12 Zerglings this game, up against just a single Reaper that's gone down. Not too bad. That's okay. It's often like that with the 2-on-1 pressure. They're always going to pick off a few lings. His creep spread here was so far out. It is buying him a good amount of time. And now he's realizing, okay, let's go pure Zergling Baneling production. But he's actually struggling to spend his minerals a little bit. Check this out. No lava. And Wait a second. Oh, he actually pulls all of his queens, doesn't he? Oh, I didn't realize he did it for this push as well. I know he pulls all his queens later, but this is cute. So the thing is, because his macro hatch is a little bit late, and because he was so set on taking this 4th base, he actually is going to struggle with his minerals a little bit to spend that. Also, he's making a lot of banelings. And it's kind of interesting with this sort of push. If you think about it, it's Marines and Siege Tanks. The Marines have +1, they've got stim, they've got combat shields, they've got medevacs healing them. These Marines, when they're together in a ball, are amazing at gunning down Zerglings because you can't really get the surface area on them. However, if they're spread against Banelings, your Zerglings suddenly become really effective. Also, because this is hitting well before Baneling speed is finished, notice it's just 1-1 upgrades versus +1, no Baneling speed yet. Your Banelings are kind of not that effective against the Siege Tanks. You've got to be really good at manually spreading them out. So Dark here says, you know what, I'm really going to focus on having enough Banelings to survive those tank shots. The Queens are always going to engage first, so the tanks will automatically target fire the Queens because they're the first thing to enter their vision. They'll just be dropping transfuses while trying to shoot the medevacs. Meanwhile, the Ling Bane's going to roll over the top, and I've got this cute little flank of Banelings here to come in from behind and try to catch those Marines. And this is a great setup. The Queens come in, the first few tank shots do go down on those Queens. Those Banelings come in, but they're just a little bit too slow. Byun really good at pulling those Marines back and manages to just barely save both tank evacs. These Zerglings desperately trying to wrap around those Marines. They do wrap around, but Byun just does the Byun. He just shoots down every single Baneling before they close in. Banelings just aren't as strong against this guy. And somehow Byun maintains this position. And you might think, well, that's not too bad for Zerg, right? It's pretty damn horrendous. 1,000 resources lost for 2,200. Yes, Dark has the superior income. He can afford a kind of bad trade. But I definitely think those 3 extra drones, big mistake. What else? I think more Zerglings, less Banelings is a must-have against Byun. And I really think looking at this engagement, you've got to go Nurture. Against Byun, he's so good at microing, you got to do a Nurture, man. If you guys who don't know what doing a Nurture is, it's basically where you set up the most perfect surround of all time. Nurture is the absolute god of engagements, the god of surrounds, and I really do feel that Byun here should have split 20 Zerglings or a few Zerglings and Banelings around this right-hand side and flanked in from here and here, or here and here, essentially just completely surrounding this army. Because what ends up happening here is most of his units are coming in from one side, and we're going to talk about this little piece of terrain here. This here is actually super important. Whenever your units... Okay, so we're dealing with splash damage first of all, but we're also dealing with a more mobile army in terms of Marines versus Banelings. Stim Marines, especially off creep, but even on creep versus slow Banelings, they are more mobile units. The more mobile, better range units will always do better when their opponents are forced into choke points, when they can abuse choke points. Now, you might look at this and say, this is not a choke point, this is a huge wide open area. But you have to take into account the way units path. Because Byun can pull behind this area of terrain, he can kind of pull up into this area. Not only is he getting off creep, but he's also forcing the units, which are all coming from a single direction from Dark. They have to come down, and they will all, trying to get from this area to this area, clump around this edge, which means juicier tank shots, something Byun doesn't get a chance to take advantage of in this particular fight. But also all the units will clump behind each other, and they will simply not get on top of the Terran units as quickly. And we're going to get to see that come into action. Now, this cute Baneling spread, look at this. Byun actually doesn't see it. Oh, he does see one Baneling, but he doesn't realize they're there. And if we watch this fight in slow-mo, those Banelings come in, and it looks like it's going to be great. But Byun recognizes the situation, and he spends more time running rather than stutter stepping, realizing he needs to get back behind that piece of terrain. And you see all these Banelings and Zerglings kind of slowing down as they go around that corner, because they all start to get stuck behind each other a little bit. Especially because a lot of them clumped up there on that siege tank. A lot of these units kind of working their way around this piece of terrain, and as soon as Byun's out in the open off creep, because the units didn't get that surround, they'd already taken so much damage, Byun manages to hang on. You can imagine this exact same engagement. Let's go back. If Dark had a flank coming in from behind of Zerglings, where does Byun run to? I really do think that was the ideal way to engage here. I think against anyone but Byun, you don't need to do that, and the way Dark engaged is fine. But in this particular scenario, we saw that Byun is just a little bit too good, and even when you catch him with a slight little surprise of Banelings there, and he's like spending more time running than shooting, you're going to end up in trouble. Also, that really was a big mistake. There was that moment just there where Dark A moved. You can't afford to do that because too many units will go on the siege tanks. He was so eager to try and kill those siege tanks. And this is that moment where it happens, where Dark needed to already be manually controlling these units. Notice how a lot of them are actually away from the piece of terrain. So they've got a decent amount of wide open area to move through. So if he was clicking these units down here, his units would kind of already be wrapping around these Marines. So he could move here and then here as his units kind of get in line with the Marines, and then A move, while these Lings and Banes at the back and Queens deal with the tanks. Of course, the threat of doing that is these tanks are still standing there shooting. So it's very scary for him to accidentally, say, pull these Zerglings off the tank, and then the tanks, like, Byun just leaves the tank sitting there. They get these juicy shots on this big clump of Ling Bane while they're moving down there. So you can see why Dark made that decision, but I think no matter what, Byun had to pick up those tanks then, or they were going to go down. And the fact that Byun managed to keep both the tanks and the Marines alive ends up disastrous for Dark. So lots of tiny things when it comes to these engages, especially against this sort of Marine tank army. And now he gets to continue being a real pain in the butt. Just sieging up these workers. Dark here does that thing he does whenever he's in a bad position. And he goes for a counterattack. So what you got to do is Zerg. Try to force the Terran to leave units at home. Look at this. Look at this, by the way. Oh, you know what? Oh my god, sorry, I just realized that I actually wrote down a couple of key moments where people show their godlikeness, and I forgot to show one yesterday in the Gettysburg game. Random tangent. If you guys remember yesterday's daily, there was a Hellion Banshee opening. There was literally a moment where Byun cloaks his Banshee the moment it leaves his base, because he knows there's an Overlord that it has to fly through, and he doesn't want to give early warning to Dark that a Banshee's coming from there. And Byun literally double taps the hotkey of his Scouting Overlord as the blur enters his vision, immediately goes home and repositions his Queens. Never sees a dot on the minimap, never sees anything. He literally just knew the exact timing that the next Banshee should be coming and knew to check his Overlord, identified the blur instantly, and moved his Queens. It's these godlike reactions which just make your jaw drop with these games. Check this out from Byun's vision. Does Byun get any sort of knowledge of that Zergling counterattack coming? Well, maybe he says to himself, you know what? I only saw Queens and Banelings there. Maybe he's counterattacking, but let's put it on Byun's camera. He happens to be looking at home doing some macro. Okay, so he's here, he's microing the front, Let's put this on faster speed, which is the regular game speed that you play on. Doing a bit of macro, yeah, just casually macroing, okay, cool. And literally raises that depot the millisecond these Zerglings come into view. I'm actually pretty sure he decided that Dark was probably going to counterattack, because if that was actually in reaction to him spotting that, then I didn't even know a human could do that. That is just insane. But completely shuts down the counterattack. It can't get in. Doesn't really manage to do much. And Dark has to just bring those Lings home and try to deal with this fact that he's losing so much mining time here. His Queens, though, now coming in. Remember, those Queens don't really care about siege tank shots. They can absorb that. And he actually starts to focus down 2 medevacs and those 2 tanks and goes, yeah, I killed the siege tanks. I only lost about 400 Zerglings to finally get rid of those bastards. But getting rid of those tanks is so important. If those 2 tanks stayed alive, and I really do think if Byun picked those up and backed off, he would be in a better position. If he picked them up, dropped here, use that terrain, man. This Zergling flank coming in from behind was too late. It was way too late. So I think if he kept those alive, he could keep pushing this spot the entire game. I think just having 1 or 2 siege tanks on this map especially is one of the most incredible things to make a Zerg uncomfortable and to give you extra value. But at this point, he's swapped into the Widow Mine production, swapping to the more standard composition of Bio Mine, and also added in 2 Liberators here. This is a cute little adjustment, which is incredible on Sejong Station, because these mineral lines are so exposed to Liberators harassing them. There's always all this dead space you can come and hide in, these nice areas where you can set up in, as well as, once again, this choke point here is a Liberator's paradise. They absolutely love it. Here was a mistake from Byun. Does lose that medevac. And Doesn't matter though, because he did pull the army out of position, and now he gets to be super annoying. Liberator's going to set up right on top of this, gunning down these Banelings as they try to morph. But that is a lot of Ling Bane, and while Liberators are annoying against Ling Bane, they don't really do that well because they do massive overkill. So the Ling Bane can usually just roll right over the top. Of course, if there were 2 siege tanks there, that fight might have been completely different. But that's the game of StarCraft for you. Behind this, Dark somehow finding the space to go for Hive. And what's really impressive here is how Dark plays from that point before where he took that fight, which was kind of nasty. Dark and every Zerg player want this 4th base. This is what they want more than anything. They always want this 4th base because it's got a big wide open area in front of it. It's good for Zerg to engage. And why do they want it? Well, this base in the middle, Terran can siege from the low ground. This base up here, Terran can drop up there, and Terran can set up tanks and mines and marines up here, which is just impossible to engage into. You've got like a pretty narrow area with a cliff above it and a watchtower. Disgusting area to play against Terran. But Dark here says, you know what, I'm on the back foot. I have to roll with the punches. I've got to take this base. My drones need somewhere to mine from. And from here, Dark just powers up and starts to play the most amazing game ever. It's not like he's behind in supply. He's still got a Hive on the way. His upgrades are still even. In fact, Byun actually does forget his +2 armor for a very long time there. There was 90 seconds from his 2nd engineering bay finishing here to him actually starting the +2 armor, even though the armory was finished. So there were, little mistakes here in these high-intensity games, even at the absolute highest level in the world. But what we're about to watch is some of the most incredible defense and some of the most incredible aggression ever. So I really want to go into first-person view because this is where Dark gets all of our attention. And this game really is a testament to Dark's skill. Byun played this amazingly as well, and we'll talk about that a bit more in the late game. But for now, let's go into first-person view. And let's actually go back to about 10 minutes. So about 30 seconds before this, so you guys can really kind of feel Byun Dark's position. If you watch the bottom right, you can see whatever Dark has selected at any moment. So he's got a lot of queens. He's got 13 queens, 73 Zerglings, 16 Banelings. He's spotted this double drop up here. He's going to go try and deal with that. Doesn't want to engage it just with Zerglings, so they can just hug the wall and gun him down. Okay, he realizes, okay, I'm getting pushed on the left. I've got Banelings and Queens there. I've got Lings and Banes on the right. Let's pull most of the units back to the left. Most of the army is over there. He starts to go in with a few Banelings at a time, trying to set off mines, trying to take good trades. Realizes he can't get a good trade. Suddenly, oh my god, there's a Liberator up there. Oh shit. He has no anti-air there. He immediately drops a Spore Crawler and pulls drones away. Another Liberator is entering the main. He pulls every single drone away while spreading Lingbane versus Widow Mines on the front. At the same time, his Lingbane squad is at his 4th, and he's rotating more units there, knowing that drop is going to actually be hitting there. Putting the drones back on mining at the 3rd base. The main base Liberator is still there. He realizes that, puts down an Ultralisk Cavern in the midst of the madness. These Queens come up and clear up that Liberator, which rotated from his 3rd base. Once again, microing Queen Ling Bane. He's got these units up there defending the drop on the north side. Transfusers landing everywhere. This Liberator still being annoying. Has to adjust the Spore Crawler. The Ling Bane there is cleaning that up. He checks that. He goes, thank God that microed itself because I didn't have the APM to do that. Drops Creep Tumors while still dealing with the Liberators. He's still spreading creep on that left-hand side. Puts his guys back to mining. He's spreading creep on the right-hand side. He says, whenever there's not pressure on a path, I need to spread creep. Rotates his army to the right, and he's expanding down to that left-hand side as well. The pace at which Dark does all of this, and the fact that he just defended that aggression without dying or taking absolutely massive damage, is beyond incredible. It's actually just astounding. He's going to come in here with some Banelings. Loses a few queens to those Liberators. He's still got a lot of queens, though. He can still take down these Liberators just by engaging into those lib zones. Looks like he's just going to roll a few Banelings in there. Does set off another Widow Mine, and now he's realizing there's not many Widow Mines left. I think I can just roll over the top of this, and he does go for it. There's not much left supporting the Marine Marauder. Byun was actually busy establishing some Marines on the high ground as well, but great transfusers on those Queens to stop those Queens dying to those Marines. And he actually routes this position, regains map control, and successfully has defended while getting Ultras out, re-establishing a 5th base, spreading creep on all sides in the midst of it. Fucking god, man. He is just a god! What the frick? I don't even have words. Like, literally, there's no deep analysis for what we just watched. It's just, he somehow just bounced between all those fights. Like, I think the one bit I want to watch one more time, and I really want to hone in on, is when he spreads the Ling Bane while like repositioning Spore Crawlers in 2 other positions. It's like, did you actually just do that? So we're gonna just ogle this one more time, because I could watch this all day. So beautiful. So this is when the first Liberator comes in, the second Liberator in the main as well. I don't know how he even noticed that on his mini-map. And look at that! Spreading his Ling Bane to minimize the Widowmine damage. Respreading creep there. Does lose seven drones. Puts guys back to mining though. Spreading the creep there in the midst of that is amazing. And yeah, putting down the Ultra Cavern. He's like, yeah, gotta just casually keep macroing while dealing with 4-pronged aggression. No worries, man. And that creep tumor survived down there as well, which is so important. It actually helps everything here so much. Ends up losing 11 drones. Split his units so damn effectively. By the way, Dark controls everything mostly manually in these fights. I was looking at his hotkeys in the replay. I know you can't see them in this particular observer format. He does have his big defensive creep queens on a hotkey. He has his injecting queens on a separate hotkey. So in desperate situations, he does bring those to the front to help absorb and drop transfuses, especially sniping down Liberators and absorbing tank shots. And we have seen him do that here as well. Yep, he controls his Ling Bane purely through boxing as well. So what he does when he's engaging, whenever he goes for a big fight, even if he's microing other things, he'll glance back and he'll just kind of click his Ling Bane forward. He'll go box, click, box, click, box, click, box, click, box, click, box, click, box, click. In this fight, there's no Widowmine, so he doesn't really need to micro it. He can just A-move. But yeah, when he goes for those big fights, he just boxes the units at the front and clicks them forward. Box, click, box, click. So he's manually spreading the units at the front. What that does is it pulls Widowmine shots away from the big clumps of Banelings and Zerglings that are a little bit further back in his army. So the front-running units are kind of pulling the Widowmine shots away from the core of his army. And they're also pulling the Widowmine shots on top of the Medivacs, on top of the Marines and Marauders. So it has a dual purpose. Of course, it also is kind of surrounding his units a little bit and that sort of thing. Now, despite that, amazing defense there. Byun still stays in this game in a very good position, or at least very decent position for a long time. Things definitely are starting to get a lot worse for him, and that chitinous plating is halfway done. And, you know, there's 5 bases for Zerg. He is just establishing his own 4th now, so, you know, Byun's income has been dipping for a while now. It's only just getting back up there now that he's got the new fully mining 4th base. And he's just staying Biomine Liberator, which is how Byun played this entire series. He wanted to stay mobile, aggressive, and tempo-oriented. He didn't want to just kind of go for Ghosts and Liberators. He felt like going for Ghosts always takes too long, and by the time you get to them, Zerg has Broodlords, and you know, they kind of have all the answers. He said it just... I think in the interview he said it just hasn't really been working for him recently. Even though players like TY have been doing it, he's like, well, it just hasn't been working for me. Like, they're very expensive, they're hard to get to, so even though Byun used to be a big Ghost guy, he decided to play much more tempo-oriented through the mid to late game. Does add ship weapons, very important upgrade for those Liberators. Here's a sick moment. Alright, Dark here comes in, says Revenge of the Zerg, traps this bio without any medevacs, gets an amazing surround, and kills a lot of these Marines and Marauders off. Chitinous plating's just finished, a perfect time. And that Widowmine gets revenge there. It just killed 19 Zerglings. Let's watch that one more time. This Widowmine of Byun's actually cools down during the battle, and it's like, I'll save you guys. Oh, nope, you're all dead. It's okay, I'll get revenge. Bam! 19 Zergling kills. But nonetheless, a very good attack from Dark there to use that chitinous plating right when it finishes. And one of the really awkward things which happened for Terran is right when chitinous plating finishes, and it was right before +3 attack finished, which means his Marines were only doing half a damage point a shot to the Ultralisk, is you always want the Marines to be shooting the Lings and Banes, but you can't really manually focus fire Marines on Zerglings. You'd have to just spend your whole micro time clicking on individual Zerglings. So what you have to try and do is you need to try and stutter step away from the Ultralisks and towards the Zerglings, or at least so the Zerglings are the closest targets. So let's have a little... So here, it's okay because he can actually... Oh, he's like, okay, cool, they'll automatically shoot the Zerglings. But over here, these Marines, all is shooting an Ultralisk and doing almost nothing to it. So that Chitinous Plating, doing massive work. Look at that Ultra. He absorbs so much damage while the Lingbane does work on these Marines. So very nice use of that moment where his Chitinous Plating finished. Of course, another cool thing is it's only 2-2 versus 3-3. Why is it only 2-2 upgrades for Dark? It's because he only just got back to 70 drones. He's been down at like 55, 60 drones for a lot of this game. He's been happy after aggression to get back to 65, and then he usually loses a few more drones. So Dark has only just really established himself on what we'd call a big economy, and he only now has taken that gas on his third base. Remember, we talked about it yesterday on Gettysburg. He was playing a 4-gas Lingbane Queen into Ultra style. That was his favored style throughout this tournament. And he only normally takes these gas as his Ultras get out. In this game, it took even longer. Only now does he remember to put back on gas because there's been so much fighting going on. He's just been trading with mostly Zerglings. But what's interesting here is Dark says, if I've got Ultras, what do I need to counter? What does Terran need to counter that? Liberators. I need Vipers and Corruptors to shut those Liberators down really hard. And that's far more important than having a little bit more damage and armor on my ground units. He says Ultra Lingbane is already pretty fantastic against Biomine. The upgrades, they help, but they don't help that much. They're not that important. So I'm just going to go for the Spire, go for the Vipers. And that's something which I really love from Dark. He just prioritizes the most important thing there. And you'll often see this where in a high-tempo, high-paced game like this, Zerg players just say, well, there's no point in me getting those upgrades. It's a huge gas investment, which doesn't pay off for a very long time. Those 3-3 upgrades take forever to finish. Whereas getting a Spire out, Corruptors and Vipers, if you don't get those on time, and the Terran sets up on top of one of your bases with like 6 Liberators, and you just don't have any Vipers or Corruptors, well, you might just lose the game. You know, at that point, it becomes impossible to engage the Terran front on, so the Terran can both frontal push a base while dropping somewhere else, and you just can't keep up. We see here, Byun hits this point where, just as I was talking about, lots of Liberators setting up these really irritating positions, and you know what? He just caught a Zergling counterattack that went down there. Good job by Byun. But Dark's buying time right now. He's already got 2 Vipers out, desperately trying to suck energy. He's got 5 Corruptors on the way, and he needs to buy time for that, because right now all he's got is Queens to shoot up. I actually feel like this creep spread here is Dark's saving grace. I think if Byun was able to force a fight on this base right now, it would be very hard for Dark to win. But because Byun can't just move his whole army onto creep, Dark is able to kind of just buy time. Byun has to wait for the creep to get pushed back. The Liberators. So many Liberators getting up. 9 Liberators. And this just looks so hard for Zerg to engage into. But keep in mind, that's a lot of Ultralisks. 4 Ultralisks with a ton of Transfusers. Corruptors and Vipers are now here. And this really is the key. Which I loved what Dark did throughout this entire series. Always going for those Vipers. Because if you abduct the Liberator, it pulls it out of siege mode. And it just kind of derps. So 4 Liberators just get completely shut down by those abducts. However, Revenge of the Widow Mines. Check out these Corruptors. These 3 Corruptors in the front, man. They cop a couple of Widow Mine shots and they die instantly. But he does have a few more Corruptors coming in behind, and most importantly of all, a hell of a lot of Queens. Really great manual pullback here on the Ultralisks as well. If you watch this, he A moves, focuses on the Viper Micro, and then he pulls these Ultralisks back. Dark also had a Zergling flank from the other side, but then he's got to pull those Ultras back. He wants to wait for his Queens and Corruptors to start killing the Liberators a bit more, and then he goes back in with the Ultras. He's dropping Transfusers like a madman. And notice as the Ultralisks go through the Liberation zones, there's no Liberators on top of them once they come out the other side. So even though he's taken most of his life in damage, his Queens and Corruptors are bought time here to snipe down the Liberators, and you're kind of trading out expensive units on both sides. And as long as you can kill most of the expensive air units of Terran, then Dark ends up in an okay position. But it really is just barely okay, right? It's still so damn close at this point. And all these Widow Mines start to reset and fire again, and Dark realizes, oh shit. And he only just then morphs Overseers. Even Dark doesn't morph Overseers during the battle. And he waits until the Widow Mines reset, and he gets reminded, and he goes, oh shit. And he's desperately trying to keep this position because he wants to kill these Widow Mines. He does not want to let those reset. He finally kills them all, but he's going to have to sacrifice all of his queens for it. And you might be like, oh shit, this base is exposed. Zerg has next to nothing. But at the end of that, only 4 Liberators in the sky, only a single medevac. And this is the most important thing. We enter the late game stage now, where Dark starts to do something fantastic. Byun has showed he wants this high tempo style, Marine Marauder stimming around, constantly shooting, Liberators. He wants to keep the fights going. And Dark says, you know what? These fights actually aren't going, like, they don't always go that incredibly for me. Unless I've got enough Vipers to, like, abduct almost all the Liberators and then enough Corruptors to also just shoot them down pretty quickly. He's like, I'm struggling to keep up here. I am down 2 upgrades. So my Ling Bane is actually starting to trade very poorly against the Marines and Marauders, but I can't just have Ultralisks in the army because they do get focused down too hard. You know, the Marauders can kite them endlessly and the Liberators do massive damage to them. So he's kind of in this position now where he says, well, how is he actually killing this army? He's never fully overwhelming the ground army, but he is focusing down those important tech units, those flying units. And what we end up seeing is actually the medevacs constantly dying and running out of energy is what ends up kind of being Byun's undoing. Over the next few minutes, Dark is going to constantly posture and feint engagements. And every time he feints, he's going to try and force a stim out of Byun, and Byun will not be able to heal these units. Look at this. Byun's army looks pretty scary for a single Ultralisk and a bunch of Ling Bane to deal with, but they're weak. They're so weak. There's only 1 medevac here. And already Byun is forced back into that position. Here, it's going to be an actual committed engage because Dark is like, okay, you're outside my base. I think I can take this. And he does have to pull back on the ground once again, but he chased the bio off enough. Like, he can't actually chase the bio down, right? But he's forcing stims, and then he's pulling back. Pull back. Force a stim. Buy time for the Corruptors to kill any Liberators that are set up. So you're killing the air units, and then you pull back. And each time you're forcing stims. And eventually, now Byun only has a single Liberator left. And he's kind of in this position where it's like, well, you've only got 4 medevacs. It's going to be hard to heal all your bio with only 4 medevacs. But at the same time, if you keep building medevacs, you're not going to have any Liberators to deal with the Ultras. And this is where Dark starts to show the impressiveness of his multitasking. He keeps looking for these engagements over and over again. He does freeze up with his creep on the left-hand side. You might be like, oh my god, Dark, you pleb. Unit count, 0 queens. Dark had to pull every single queen into that big hold before, so he actually has no queens. It's okay though, because he's building expensive units like Ultralisks, like Corruptors, and because he has a casual 7 hatcheries, he can actually keep up his production pretty well. So he's looking for an engage again, seeing if he can do damage to an exposed base. And Dark also realizes at this point that Zerg enters a new period of strength. Suddenly, Terran has to be more spread out. And Terran kind of struggles to defend a lot of different areas. We see here that this base is not a planetary. Byun has lifted his main base over here. And even though he's added some turrets to help try and defend Corruptors, his Marine Marauder is a little bit out of position. Looked scary for a second there. He's going to come forward, clean up this bio, clean up those Banelings a little bit. Once again, Medevac's completely out of energy. He's not going to be able to heal this stim energy. His Medevac's actually flying to their death. He's trying to blast down these units, but there's just a little bit too much Ultraling Bane on top of his base. So he's got a kite and kite. He can't stand his ground. And even though he takes a pretty fantastic trade on this right-hand side, at the same time, the Lings and Ultras clean out his third base. And Dark trades a lot of army to take out a big chunk of Byun's economy. Remember, at this point, those Ultras still being down in armor upgrade against the attack upgrades. Those Marines are still doing... oh, actually, it's 2 damage a shot, not 1 damage, isn't it? Yeah, so they're doing 2 damage a shot to the Ultralisks, which is actually significant. If you're on equal upgrades, it takes 500 shots for the Marines, or more than that if you count regeneration to kill Ultralisks. But on these upgrades, it's going to take the Marines 250 shots to kill an Ultralisk. So it's like, yeah, they'll eventually get through there, I guess. And Dark, replacing Vipers, still making the judgment call to say, queens aren't important right now, I don't need queens. He probably does need 1 queen here to respread creep. But this is the clutch move. Because Byun is forced into the impossible situation of needing to attack constantly. He needs to put the pressure on. He needs all of his army together, and he needs to set it up. The Liberators add even less mobility. Already with Widow Mines, you want to be kind of pushing in a set path and forcing the Zerg to engage into you, but then you add Liberators, and even more, you need to be set up in one position. If you're here, Zerg rotates and hits this base. You set up here, he rotates and hits this base. It's very hard to defend both locations at once, and also you don't want to give the Zerg time. You don't want to let him have those bases up. So Byun starts to push. This Zergling counterattack, though, has flanked around, and having no planetary here, Byun loses half of his economy and half of his work account in a moment. And Dark here is still massively behind an army supply from that previous trade where he knocked out a big chunk of Byun's economy, but now he's knocked out even more of it. And Dark, being very smart, very patient, rotates these drones while continuing to counterattack. He knows that to fight right now would be pointless. And this comes back to your fundament of StarCraft. If you sacrifice a lot of army to damage your opponent's economy, you give yourself an economy lead, but an army deficit. So the last thing you want to do after that is then fight them again immediately. You want to drag it out so that your economy lead has time to kick in to build into a bigger army lead. You can convert your economy lead into an army lead, or at least an even army situation. So it's all about buying time now for Dark, trying to just keep shutting down that 5th base of Byun, but most importantly, just buy time. Don't fight for this base because this is like 2 bases above Byun. Right now, how many bases have we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is the 6th base. So Dark can go back to 5 bases, still have a full mining mineral line, a couple of mineral patches over here. He'll still be mining, whereas Byun is almost completely out of mineral patches. So he's still going to be up a full mining base. He's just got to buy time and not fight right now when he's down 30 army supply. So incredibly clever play from Dark. Just playing to the fundamental rules of StarCraft. And Byun here, he knows he needs to do damage now. He simply cannot re-establish this base. He would need to leave too many units there. Zerg does have the superior mobility. Lingbane might not be as good in frontal fights, but superior mobility for sure. And this is a really cute engagement here by Dark. He sees that the Liberators and air units are kind of exposed over here, so he comes with the Vipers and the Corruptors on a bit of a flanking path, flanking with Ling Ultra Bane from 2 sides. Not a full surround, but a pretty damn good angle. Abducts a few of those Liberators so that they're not able to do their damage and start sniping them down with the Corruptors, while the Lingbane Ultra try to go over the top. But once again, I do kind of feel like a Nurtio surround there would have been better, but because the Liberators were already set up on the base, and he was starting to threaten the last full mining base of Dark, I understand that Dark had to take that engage. And once again, even though he throws away a lot of Lingbane without killing a lot of the bio, the air unit count gets smaller and smaller for Byun. These units they just can't heal. And look at this, Dark is going to constantly just poke in, trying to force stims out of these units. But just don't overcommit. Go in, force a stim, pull back. These units can't heal. Every time you do that, if he commits onto creep, then fight him. As soon as he pulls back, pull back. That stim's about to run out. He's going to go in again. And he'd say, oh, I've got banelings on top of you. Forces another stim as well as hitting the banelings. And Byun's army's getting weaker and weaker. Once again, the Zerglings come in on this 5th base. There's just no way for Byun to defend that. And Dark here has somehow managed to just hang on in such an awkward position, has defended so well this entire game. And now as the bio is here on its red hit points, there's so few units left. These Ultras are all deep in the red. It's still so scary to engage into the Liberators. That Widow Mine shot actually doing a bit of friendly fire there. The bio here is so weak, but one healthy Ultralist gets in on top. The Corruptors snipe down the last Liberators, and you know, once those air units die, the bio just does not have staying power. So Dark always focuses on killing the air units. As long as he doesn't get completely overwhelmed by the ground units, it's going to be fine. Because it's the air units that allow Byun to push on creep. It's the air units that allow Byun to set up those unassailable positions with lots and lots of Liberators. But if the air units are gone, the bio on its own pushing onto creep, not nearly as scary. Zerg can defend with a much smaller ground army, just due to the nature of Banelings on creep, Ultras on creep, Zerglings on creep, all become massively boosted. They close with the enemy units so damn fast. Sorry, the side of my mouse is peeling off a little bit. Alright, cool. By the way, guys, another awesome moment just to kind of revel in the skill of both players. Like, Byun there, he played such a sick game. What could Byun do better? I do want to bring it back to that key moment early on where Dark defended many locations. And I want to look at 2 more things quickly. So there's this moment here at about 10 minutes 30 where Byun is setting up for the engage of the four-pronged engage. Liberator already queued up to go up into the main base and siege up that mineral line. Beautiful move. This does great damage, massive damage. He also has a Liberator queued up down the right-hand side to siege up on the third. Once again, beautiful move, massive damage. Double drop here, forcing a big reaction of Ling Bane. Dark very smartly has a Spore Crawler, so the medevacs can't just drop in the mineral line, pick up, drop on the high ground. And he's pushing the front at the same time. Now, I really do feel like a huge thing this game that would have made the game like unstoppable for Byun comes back to those early siege tanks he lost. Remember in that follow-up engagement earlier? I really feel if he kept those two siege tanks alive, so this is after he already took the good trade, he kept the tanks alive. Going in for this follow-up pressure is great, but I think he should have been willing to just pick up and leave. Instead, he gets a little bit overeager here, and he loses both siege tanks. And I do feel like those siege tanks, if he kept those alive, would have given him so much value. Later on, at this 10-minute mark, you can imagine the power of a couple of siege tanks. Just due to this particular area on this map, there is no position more painful for Zerg to deal with tanks than here. As he comes up here, he's got Widow Mines. If there were tanks backing that up, it would be so brutal. Can he micro this pressure better? Did Byun make a big mistake? I know Dark reacted godlikely, but did Byun make a big mistake? That's a big question which, you know, people always want to ask. Well, this engagement here, pretty damn good. Great micro. These Widow Mines do need to set up sooner rather than later. Because he's so focused microing here, I mean, this is one of Byun's strengths, is he always focuses on the main army to keep it alive at the right time, whereas other players sometimes make a bit of a slip-up, focus on the wrong thing. He was a little bit slow with the double drop, though. Dark actually pulled a lot of Ling Bane over to this base. If he did just drop on that high ground, in range of those drones, I think he could have forced Dark into a position where he simply did not have the APM to deal with everything at once. Right now, those Marines could be killing drones from that high ground. Instead, he kind of engages into the Ling Bane. I think that, as small of a mistake as that is, I actually think this is huge because I really feel like Byun took Dark to the precipice of being like, oh, my brain's overloaded, I can't deal with this many things at once. Even Dark, of all people, he has to hit that limit at some point. And I feel like because Byun wasn't quite able to do that, it didn't quite work out. Now this Liberator Siege up here was really cute as well. I normally love this sort of move. And let me tell you, this always works if you're playing at my level of turn, or actually if you're playing anything below the very top player. If you've got a Liberator Sieged in their main, you're dropping the fourth, and you're pushing the natural, and then you just rotate this Liberator from there. You say, okay, let's just send that over here onto this base. There's a really surprise angle where my opponent's not watching. Then you can potentially get some massive damage done. But Dark here pulled back and dealt with that. And this Liberator didn't kill anything. But I think it's worth trying that move. 100%. This Liberator here did so much. 17 kills on that Lib. But that drop up there, I really think that could have helped Overload. If we go a little bit later in the game, one more moment, which I just wanted to share, because this was such a sick moment of watching it live. There was this really, there's a lot of people who are like much more casual at BlizzCon, right? Who are WoW players, they're StarCraft fans, but you know, there's Overwatch fans, Hearthstone fans, Diablo fans, you name it. But everybody wants to watch the StarCraft finals because they know it's always an epic experience. And I had this like this cute couple sitting behind me in the audience, and basically the girl kind of was like, yeah, I don't think she'd ever played StarCraft. And the guy's like, oh, you know, he's trying to explain to her what all the units do and like kind of some of the cool stuff. And you could tell he was like a reasonably casual player, but like he had the understanding of everything. And there was this one moment where all this fighting was going on, and there's like so much action all over the map. And I'm gonna find the moment. I'm gonna find the exact moment. I think it was the next big engagement down here on the south side. Let me find it. Ooh. It's right when Dark takes this 6th base. Oh, it was a bit later than I thought. There's so much action in this game, I kind of lose track of when things happen. All right, just gonna wait for this base to go down. Here we go. This is it. This is the big fight. Yep. So there's the huge Liberator spread, and Dark is going to expand in the middle of this fight, or just as the fight's about to start, takes this base, and there's this moment where like Tastosis will like, what the hell? This huge fight happens, and they're like, oh my god, this is happening, this is happening, and this is the really intense fight. Remember, every single queen was pulled into this engagement. This fight like is super important. Dark like barely hangs on here against Byun's aggression. Remember, the creep spread bought him some time. He finally engages. He wipes out most of the Liberators. And there was this fight goes on for quite a while. This is like a 1-minute engagement, right? And the Ultras are all getting gunned down, but so are the air units, and the Widow Mines are being cleaned up. And there's like this skirmish at the end of this where the Queens and Lings and Corruptors are trying to hold this position so that the Overseers can come in and clean up the Widow Mines. And this is all happening. And then Tasos is like, wait, what the hell? Dark's taking a 6th base in the middle of this? And I just remember hearing the wonder in the voice of this guy sitting by him. He's like, oh my god! And he was so just amazed that we just watched 2 minutes of the most intense micro in action ever, and somehow Dark had both taken this base, and he actually transitions workers over there as well. He's actually already got workers mining from it, like just as it finishes. And just hearing the wonder in this guy's voice was incredible. It made me so happy. I was like, yeah, I've played about 20,000 games, probably more than 20,000 games of StarCraft. Probably played 50,000 games of StarCraft at this point. I've watched it all, and I also have my jaw open that this is happening right now. The fact that Dark managed to do this against Byun is what makes it so incredible as well, because Byun did not play bad here. I can say, oh, that drop should have landed on the high ground and killed a few more drones, but Byun was making things so difficult for Dark this entire game. Byun played like an absolute god. And the fact that Dark withstood that after that first push and the tanks did so much damage, I do feel like this was just incredible play from Dark. Having to expand to this base is something Zerg players hate doing because of that high ground, because of this whole narrow area in front of it, but he just defended so damn well over and over again. And yeah, it went fantastic. So I'm just going to put this on Byun's camera. I'm going to check my notes, see if there's any other cool moments which I forgot to mention.
Mineral field completed.
I did love that Revenge Widow Mine when he surrounds the bio as well. That was pretty sick. Yeah, so back to that idea of constantly going in. And this is something Dark did in all of his games, by the way, but I didn't really mention it that much. So I did want to talk about this idea of how Dark likes to go in the late game and constantly threaten engagements. And we're at that stage of the game at this point, right? Where he goes in, forces stims, backs out. And he's not just trying to waste the medevac energy. That is a big part of it. Remember, the Terran really struggles to build both Liberators and medevacs. They really struggle to afford more starports because they've usually skipped some gas geysers. Terran, with the bio-focused army, normally skips the 6th gas if they can get away with it. You see only later on has he taken these extra gases on his 4th and 5th base because he's running low as he starts building Liberators. But yeah, basically, it also taxes the APM and the positioning. There's so much about where your APM is, where you're looking, and where your actions are in Zerg vs. Terran. StarCraft especially, but especially... always in StarCraft, sorry, but especially in Zerg vs. Terran, where if you can pull your opponent's attention away, you can force more mistakes out of them. And Dark's ability to constantly push in, force a reaction without necessarily overcommitting is something which, as the game goes on, it feels like Byun needs to be more and more careful with his engagements. And even though if an Ultralisk player ever derps and they just kind of like take a bad engage, like he can clean that up and then be in a great position. But because Dark constantly threatens these engagements, you steadily see Byun get pushed back into his side of the map. Because he's like, okay, react to this, stim, oh crap, okay, now I've got to wait for my units to heal, or now I need to reposition. And he doesn't find the APM or the spare units to start dropping. You see, at this stage of the game, the drops have dried up. The multi-prong from Byun has dropped up. He's still up in supply, but he's very afraid of those Ultralisks coming in for a frontal engage, so he wants to kind of keep everything together. His army starts to just work this way in the late game of Zerg vs. Terran, where if the Zerg can keep the pressure on the Terran and him worried about multiple areas, the Terran really struggles to set up this frontal push in a timely fashion. Suddenly there's these openings at the back. We see these Zergling counters, which is so decisive. So not only does he end up just winning against the bio, as you can see here, by wounding it slowly, by forcing over stims and sniping down air units, but he was also able to force the APM away from Byun's focus and put enough pressure on so that Byun never felt like he had the freedom to keep queuing up those Liberators to harass, just sending those single drop ships. And as a result, Dark got to play more and more perfectly in his frontal engagements, and not only that, he got to find spare APM himself. He said, well, suddenly you're not on my side of the map. If I'm not looking, I'm not going to lose 12 drones in an instant from a drop stimming into my mineral line. I can afford to put more APM into counterattacks, which is a very micro-intensive, APM-intensive area. And so Dark starts to focus more on those ultras and lings in the counterattacks. He slides them in at the perfect times. You see him coming in with these cute angles with those Vipers grabbing those Liberators. I do feel he could have a few more Nurture-like surrounds, but actually putting that into practice when you're playing at over 400 APM is a different story. And he just kind of, yeah, steadily gets forced out of that game. So I really do love the way Dark has the ability to just constantly move his army around the map and exert map control through feinting aggression. It's very powerful, especially when you're focused on sniping down the air units with Viper Corruptor. It really allows you to kind of grind the game out in the late game and eventually win it out. One thing I also do want to think about is maybe the idea of what if Byun took a planetary on his 5th? I do feel like the lack of being able to secure that from small link counters was huge. What if instead of lifting the main, Byun just drops his main over there and just drops mules there? Doesn't actually put SCVs there, so it's just like a bonus base, and if it gets found and counterattacked, it's like, yeah. I do think there is potentially merit for taking a planetary fortress down at this base. Building a 5th command center, taking it. The thing is, because Terran wants to keep the aggression, they don't want to let Zerg, add in Broodlords and the perfect number of Vipers and Corruptors. They want to keep the pressure up. They want to keep trading with these aggressive kind of units. The bio doesn't really gain value over time. So if you go for that 5th base, maybe that slows down the pace of the game so much that you're forced to go into things like Ghosts. And that kind of goes away from Byun's entire game plan. So I'm not going to be as bold as to say something like, oh yeah, he definitely should have taken a 5th, then the Zerglings wouldn't have done damage and he would have been fine. 400 minerals might not sound like a lot in this late game, but that 400 minerals plus the 150 minerals and 150 gas for the planetary fortress, you add all that together and it starts to just, it starts to add up really bad. So I think it's something where you can't underestimate the power of tempo, and a lot of players, especially classic strategy players who play very defensive games in other franchises and even in StarCraft 2, where they like to play the very defensive, like turtle-y styles, they often look at this sort of stuff and they're like, well, why wouldn't you just get a planetary? But you've got to understand that the whole flair of Byun's play is that aggressiveness. It's the ability to put on pressure. And as soon as you start making small concessions to defend your own base more and taking that away from your aggressive power, you give your opponent a lot more room to potentially run away with the game. So it has far-reaching consequences. Definitely something I would love to see how it would have played out, but I can't say 100% one way or the other. So anyway, guys, that is it. We are done. This was the most amazing game of this year. I know half of the analysis in this was basically me going, oh my god, they're so good. Look at how good they're multitasking. This isn't the sort of episode where you go and you copy this at home and you're like, I'm going to defend 6 places at once like Dark did. But you can draw conclusions from a few of those smart decisions. I love how Dark sacrificed with that attack to clear out the economy on the 5th base. And then he sacrificed his own 6th base when Byun counterattacked, because if you trade that army away, you kill their economy, you've got to buy time, you've got to drag it out as long as possible. I love the sniping of the air units from Dark. I love the feinting. In terms of Byun, that 4-pronged double Liberator plus a double drop plus pushing the front was beautiful. His use of the terrain with his first tank evac pressure was absolutely stunning. I do think if Byun keeps those tanks alive, he might just win this game. I think that frontal, that back path on the natural just becomes this horrible zone of death where those siege tanks rack up 80, 90 kills over the course of the game. But easier said than done. Of course, Dark made the comeback in this game. Ended up being 2-3 after this. And tomorrow I will be going through the final game, which is a bit of a shorter one. Not the best game. This was definitely the best game of the year. So thanks for watching, guys. I appreciate the support. Let's finish up the VOD, as this was a really long one. I had so much to talk about in this massive 23-minute game. Thank you for hanging out, guys. I'll see you all tomorrow for another daily Thanks for hanging out. Don't forget to hug a watermelon, kick a walrus, and of course, punch a watermelon to the moon. I'll catch you guys next time. Goodbye and good night.